First of all, I deeply apologize. Last 3 weeks we had to cancel it because the Hall of Harmony was engaged. As we know, all problems of existence are problems of harmony. And it's difficult to harmonize the various programs. It's quite understandable. We can continue the journey, the great transition, which is not just a promise or a hope, but a certitude. The Mother has given this message: never for an instant vacillate in the faith that the work undertaken by Aurobindo will not end in a success. This is for sure, that the most happening event is taking place and we are oblivious of it. All over the world, it's shaping the world and humanity and its destiny. A new world is born. Where is it, we ask? It is there silently, taking shape in the heart and the mind of the little ones. It is there in a moment's aspiration towards beauty and light and truth. It is there unseen, slipping right beneath the old one. It's Mother's expression that it is slipping itself, almost silently, unseen, unheard. Because that is how the divine acts, unlike us humans, who make a great show and sham of everything. The divine acts so silently. There is a beautiful passage in Savitri alluding to this moment when the night is at its darkest and the sun is about to rise. Thus shall the mass transcendent mount his throne, when darkness deepens, strangling the earth's breast, and man's corporeal mind is the only lamp. As a thief's in the night shall be the covert tread of one who steps unseen into his own house. This earth belongs to the divine. But it's very strange that to come here, to take charge of his kingdom, he has to act like a thief. He has to come incognito. We just had the 4th of April and we are reminded how Aurobindo came here incognito. There was another name that he assumed. This is how the earth responds. That the divine comes incognito, as a thief in the night shall be the covert tread of one who steps unseen into his own house. A charm and sweetness open life's closed doors, a power into mind's inner chamber steal. A charm and sweetness open life's closed doors, and beauty conquer the resisting world. Aurobindo knew that none of us would be able to know what is happening, though we will definitely speak about it in conferences, seminars, with all our prophecies and predictions. So he added towards the end, God shall grow up while the wise men talk and sleep. For man shall not know the coming till its hour, and belief shall be not till the work is done. This world which is shaping our own world is right behind the old one. And what we see, by the pressure of this old, by the pressure of this new world which is right within, this old world is destroying itself bit by bit. And we see the great destruction, the divine destroying his own body. This world he had established, and this world he is destroying for a greater world to arise out of it. We see the destruction, we see the ruins of the past, but we do not see the future which is yet to emerge or is already emerging. There are these very powerful lines of Aurobindo written almost at the beginning of the previous century or towards the end of the 20th, in late 1990s or in late 1890s or early 2000. And these lines are not just prophetically powerful, but they leave no scope for any doubt or misconception about the end of the old world and the arising of the new order. It's a long poem, In the Moonlight, where Aurobindo speaks of the peak of the old world. The peak of the old world is gospel. Science and industry come and they create their own gospel, which is taught, unfortunately, even till date. This gospel is being taught to children. I have my own name for this gospel, Hiranyakaship's gospel, because this was his gospel, that mind, body and life are all, and there is nothing like the soul or spirit. So this is a gospel that they present before man, and at the end of it, a whole civilization is created, which is trapped under its own perfection. And so what comes at the end? Therefore, he manifests himself once more, the wonders of the secret world within. Wrapped yet with an uncertain mist begin to look from that thick curtain out, the door opens. Her days are numbered, and not long shall she be suffered to belittle thus man and restrain from his tempestuous uprising that immortal spirit strong. The days of a kind of science, of an intellect which had explored matter and its powers are numbered. In another poem, A Vision of Science, Aurobindo alludes to this. Religion is dead and passing away, and science is in the forefront. The spirit of religion is fading, or rather its form is perishing, because Aurobindo makes a distinction between the spirit of religion and religionism. And while it is going, it cautions science. Thou thinkest term and end for thee is not, but though thy pride is great, thou hast forgot these things that waits for thee beside thy way. All questions thou mayest answer but one day, her question shall await thee, that reply, for they who cannot die. She slays them, and their mangled body lie upon the highways of eternity. Therefore, if thou wouldst live, answer first this one thing: who art thou in this dungeon laboring? And then Aurobindo, with his characteristic humor, replies that I saw a miracle before my eyes. What is the miracle he sees? He sees the infinite denying his infinity. For that is the gospel of science, that there is nothing but finite. There is nothing like infinity. So here is Aurobindo again saying that her days are numbered. He rises now. The God has taken birth. The revolutions that pervade the world are faint beginnings, and the discus hurled of Vishnu speeds down to enring the earth. We spoke last time of the story of Sati, who gives herself in the fire. Sati represents the old creation. She questions a lot, doubts her. She doesn't believe, and she follows her own way. So she must give herself into the fire. But what follows after is something very interesting. Shiva goes, while Daksh is rejuvenated, albeit in a strange and queer way, but Sati's body he carries, and with a great sorrow filling his heart, he goes from world to world, It is the sorrow of the Lord carrying the body of load of a creation which could not fulfill its purpose. It's not an ordinary sorrow. So Shiva is carrying the body of Sati and goes from world to world. But as he is going, there are some other footsteps behind him. Vishnu realizes that till this old creation goes, the new creation will not come. So Vishnu goes behind and with his discus cuts the body of Sati in bit by bit into different parts. And it is these that in India are known as the sacred spots, the Shakti Peeth. Of course, that is the Shakti Sthal of the old creation. So here Sri Aurobindo is alluding to this. The revolutions that pervade the world are faint beginnings, and the discus hurled of Vishnu speeds down to enring the earth. What are these revolutions that Sri Aurobindo is speaking of? That are the faint beginnings of the new creation. In the thick of night, when there was nothing but ghor tamas, Sri Aurobindo was looking at the revolutions. He could see the end of imperialism. He could see the end of capitalism. He could foresee the end of communism. It's very strange. And the mother, in one of her talks in 1915 given to the women of Japan, she speaks of the feminine revolution, and she says that this is one of the things that the new age is bringing. The new age is going to bring the women unrest. At still another point, she speaks of the queer things that people are doing all over the world. And she speaks of the news that she is getting from America, that people are behaving in a peculiar way, of course alluding to the hippie movement. And she is saying that though it is upsetting and disconcerting to many people, it is a good sign. Can we imagine? The whole old world order is collapsing and a new is beginning to emerge. The old shall perish, it shall pass away. Expunged, annihilated, blotted out. There is no doubt left in anybody's mind. The old order has collapsed. The old values, all that we cherished and loved, there were many beautiful things and they were very dangerous things. It was a world charming and sweet, yet dangerous. It had its beautiful peaks. The old world order had its own beauty and charm, which we can look back with nostalgia, but it is not going to return. At its peak, its finest flower was the saint and the sage, who looked at the divine, at the glories of the beyond, through the veil of the sattvic ego, the highest point that the mind could reach. From there he looked to the beyond and said, there is a beauty and a glory which I see and seek, and one day I'll pass into it and merge into it forever. That was the peak of the old world. The other peaks were the hero falling on the battlefield, dying for a great cause, the noble Kshatriya, the man of heroism and valor, the knight, the great warrior sacrificing his life for the sake of the common good. There were peaks of the old world, beautiful things. And there were also the dangerous nether deeps. The old world also created what Sri Aurobindo would name, especially in the last century, the modern Philistine, the economic barbarian, for whom there is nothing else but utility as the sole value of life. He would value only what is utilitarian. His sole motive of everything is not beauty but utility. And Sri Aurobindo several places alludes to it, that this kind of approach is quite barbaric, and this was the kind of commercial barbarism which was another product of the past age. And all that is going to go away. The high no less than the low. And all the iron bands that ring about man's wide expansion shall at last give way. Freedom, God, immortality, the three are one and shall be realized at length. Love, wisdom, justice, joy and utter strength gather into a pure felicity. One cannot have one without the other. There is no freedom without God, without the divine. And there is no God which holds man in the hollow of his palm and crushes him. And there is no immortality which does not free man even while he is embodied in his very body. It comes at last, the day foreseen of old. What John in Patmos saw, what Shelley dreamed, vision and vain imagination deemed the city of delight, the age of gold. The iron age is ended, irrespective of whatever all the calculations of people may say. The iron age is ended. Only now the last fierce spasm of the dying past shall shake the nations, and when that has passed, earth vast of ills shall raise a fairer brow. What we see today, there is a very interesting vision of the mother, seen again in the early part of the previous century, which she recounts, where she sees one of those great four beings, the Lord of the nations. And there is another nation soul, who is dressed like a bride, who wants to sit by his side, who wants to be seated as the Lord, as at the side of the Lord of the nations. And this Lord of nations wants to test her. She is dressed like a bride, and the mother is standing in that high tower, and she is watching the whole scene. And he gives her a cup to drink, and the cup is full of blood. So she is trembling, and as she is trembling, he tells her, "Oh, you are afraid of the very first test? You don't deserve to be seated by my side." And then she sees through it. Mother sees through it and tells her, "Don't worry, drink it. He is fooling you. This is no blood, it is only water." And she trusts him and drinks the water. Just then, she sees, because she has uttered those words, the Lord of the nation is furious, and he asks her to keep quiet. You are not to intervene in this play. And then the mother says, "You keep quiet. I have spoken in a language that you don't understand." And then she describes that the whole room becomes dim, and the darkness takes a formidable shape, and it is the shape of terror. And a great fight and battle ensues between the mother and this embodied darkness. Of course, this is described in great length in Savitri. It's a real thing that she has fought for earth and man. At the end of the long battle, which is very close, a combat where if one false move and falsehood would conquer the world, but as it happens, the end is certain victory, and terror is demolished, and terror crumbles like dust to the floor. So here is that last dying spasm, terror shaking the nations. Even when we read Savitri, we see the last aspect that comes of the darkness, the domains of darkness, when Aurobindo describes layer after layer, falsehood and darkness, he goes deeper and deeper. And towards the end, he describes the scepter of bombs and bodies massacred and slain and strewn along the paths. But the strange is, just after that, he sees a great emergence, as if suddenly the darkness is torn away, and darkness slipped like a failing cloak from the reclining body of a god. So something like that, here Aurobindo is describing that the iron age is ended. Only now the last fierce spasm of the dying past shall shake the nations, and when that has passed, earth vast of ills shall raise a fairer brow. This is man's progress, for the iron age prepares the age of gold. What we call sin is but man's leavings as from deep within. The pilot guides him in his pilgrimage. So we should not be that much worried about. What we call as sin and error are things which man has to leave from inside. He carries the burden of the animal past. His body is still constituted of the animal substance, and therefore these things have to be expunged slowly. He leaves behind the ill with strife and pain. He wrestles with this because it clings and constantly returns. A million years, a billion years, nature has taken to create man. And all these stages of evolution live in us. We breathe not only the human consciousness, but something of the animal, something of the reptile, something of the worm, and of course we carry in us the clod. All this we breathe, all this we carry inside as a heavy load. So Aurobindo is saying, because it clings and constantly returns, and in the fire of suffering fiercely burns, more sweetness to deserve, more strength to gain. So the more difficult the trying time, the more testing the time, the more difficult the passage, the greater is the victory and the greater is the realization. This is the great declaration, the old world is gone. What is the difference? What is this new thing which is coming? Always when we try to look at it, we look at it from the eyes of the old. We want to see the old cherished things. We want to see all the things that were so beautiful. Early morning, people would get up and pray to God. They would touch the feet of Mother Earth. They would worship their elders. They would look at their teachers with reverence. They would always listen and obey all the good things that are told to them. All that has collapsed. What is left? What about religion, morality, ethics? All the rest has gone. And the mother would tell us, yes, she would once again say, all that has gone, something new has to come. What is the difference between this old world and a new world? We cannot even conceive. The difference is as vast, she says, as between animal and man. Between the beings of the supramental world and men, almost the same separation exists as between men and animals. Some time ago, I had the experience of identification with animal life. And it is a fact that animals do not understand us. Look at mother's experiments, what all she has done. She had to experiment not only with man but with the gods and the animals. Because if you move one chain in the creation, all the links have to be changed. It's not enough simply that man may evolve. The animal creation has to follow pace. It has been quickened, which we can actually observe now. The behavior of many animals has changed. Some of them have begun to behave as if they are very close to humans. They compete not only for space in the cities, they almost fight with them. So there is a whole chain in the link. And she says, I had the experience of identification with animal life, and it is a fact that animals do not understand us. Their consciousness is so constructed that we elude them almost entirely. And yet I have known pet animals, cats and dogs, but especially cats, that used to make an almost yogic effort of consciousness to reach us. But usually, when they see us as we live and act, they do not understand. They do not see us as we are, and they suffer because of us. Our humanity suffers because of the presence of the new consciousness. It doesn't understand what is happening around. The mother gives at another place a very interesting example. Of course, she has been present at all the epochs of the evolutionary journey. Even when the human creation came into existence, she speaks about that age when animal took leap into the human. And she says something very interesting. It was a very harmonious life. In fact, she points out the place that it took place somewhere around the eastern side of India, somewhere around Java. And it's very interesting that the first man is called the Java man, actually. And she speaks of the memory of that life, one of the first memories of human creation. Here she is speaking of the transition from the man to the supramental being. That it will be very difficult to understand these beings. But usually, when they see us as we live and act, they do not understand. They do not see us as we are, and they suffer because of us. We cannot imagine that a person keeps a pet, plays with it, and the next day just walks away, leaving it with someone else to be taken care of. They don't understand. Why would somebody do that? It's not right. I completely depend on this creature, and yet man does it. The way he lives, the way he eats, the way he moves around. We are a constant enigma to them. Only a very tiny part of their consciousness has a link with us. And it is the same thing for us when we try to look at the supramental world. Only when the link of consciousness is established shall we see it. When Mother was asked that, how do we know that the new world is shaping? She gave a very interesting simile. Only like knows like. And this, she says, when a stag has passed through a forest, very interestingly, it used to be one of the old puzzles. When a stag has passed through the forest, who can say what has passed through? Only someone who knows the stag and has seen it. Only he can say, yes, these are the footprints of a stag. So here she is saying, only when the link of consciousness is established shall we see it. And even then, only the part of our being which has undergone transformation in this way will be able to see it as it is. Otherwise, the two worlds would remain apart, like the animal and human worlds. Then she describes the great experience of the difference between these beings. The well-known experience that the mother had of the supramental boat, that the beings are being carried from this side of the world to another side. And when people are being carried to the new creation, they are being tested to see who is ready and who is not ready. So what is the criteria used? She says something very interesting. What I can say is that the point of view, the judgment, was based exclusively on the substance of which the people were made. That is, whether they belonged completely to the supramental world, whether they were made of that very special substance. The standpoint taken is neither moral nor psychological. All the best things that we can imagine today in the old creation were not necessarily the criteria for the new creation. The best ape is not necessarily the most suited for turning into the best human being. The mother speaks of it in one of her very early talks. She says the most polished gems that we find today is out of line from that stone in which life germinated itself. Nobody till today, with all the discoveries of science, we have not been able to trace out that piece of stone, that piece of mud in which life took shape. Scientists are doing a lot of experiments all over the world. That can there be certain conditions in which life can be created out of matter? But nobody knows. What was that original matter out of which life was created? We have the best stones, we have the diamonds, we have rubies, sapphire, each pearl, each which is like a treasure, but none of these stones can turn into life. What was that stone? Incognito. And then she speaks again, what was that tree which first changed into animal life? It was out of line of the biological species that we know today. The most beautiful trees that can last for many, many thousands of years. They are not the ones, they survive, they are survival of the fittest, we say. They are trees that can really survive all the vagaries of time. But we do not know which was the tree which mutated into the animal species. And then she again says that we do not know the ape that turned into man was not necessarily, was out of line of all the apes that we know of today. Nobody knows what was that ape that changed into a human being, because the links are lost. It is gone and a new being has come. So similarly she gives this example, and it's really true. She speaks of the human beings, that the best flower of humanity, the humanity which is so satisfied with itself, the humanity that has touched its peak in art and science and is so satisfied. It's a wonderful humanity. She speaks of a humanity at its peak, its maximum, and she says, it is not the one. They may be ready for becoming intellectual disciples of Sri Aurobindo. They may be ready to receive something of that knowledge in the mind because they are refined, but they are not necessarily the ones who are going to change. What is that thing which is going to change? So she is telling here that the standpoint taken is neither moral nor psychological. It is probable that the substance their bodies were made of was the result of an inner law or inner movement which at that time was not in question. Then mother says, when I came back, simultaneously with the recollection of the experience, I knew that the supramental world is permanent, that my presence there is permanent, and that only a missing link was necessary for the connection to be made to the consciousness and the substance. And it is this link which is now being forced. How strange when we say that she was born on 21st February 1878 and she left her body on 17 November 1973, and we have all kinds of theories whether the work was done or not done, whether it is a failure or a success. She is herself alluded long back. She is there permanently present. She alludes to the new body. She alludes to the link, everything. In fact, in 1956, after that the mother says, I want a sign from you whether I should continue or not, because the work that was to be done is done. The new consciousness is there and it would do the work of the new creation. And yet she continues to hasten the process still further. I had the impression, an impression which remained for quite a long time, almost a whole day, of an extreme relativity. No, not exactly that. The impression that the relation between this world and the other completely changed the standpoint from which things should be evaluated or appraised. This standpoint had nothing mental about it. All our intellectual understandings of life, the highest that our reason can tell us, is nothing but the dimmest possible light before that glory of glories which is born. This standpoint had nothing mental about it, and it gave a strange inner feeling that lots of things we consider good or bad are not really so. How can we understand the supramental world? It was very clear that everything depended on the capacity of things, on their aptitude in expressing the supramental world or being in relation with it. It was so completely different, sometimes even altogether contrary to our ordinary appraisal. When mother was asked, what is it that the supermind will drive away first? So many defects, we human beings are a bundle of defects. So what is it that the supermind will drive away first? The mother says, drive away what? Everything is in it. Then she pauses for a while and then she says, it will drive away hypocrisy. One of the first things that she says, it will drive away is hypocrisy. All the beautiful masks that we wear. And really we see that happening all over the world. The saint with his mask of saintliness is torn. Even very strangely, the man, the villain with his mask of villainy is torn. And humanity is being able to see the good behind the mask of evil and the ugliness behind the mask of good. It's a strange thing which is happening. Other things are happening which mother would tell us. But here she is saying, I recollect one little thing which we usually consider to be bad. Thank God she is not telling us, because we would justify it. So she is not telling us what is that, but she is telling us this much, how strange it was to see that in truth it was something excellent. And we can keep wondering and keep figuring it out. Is it obstinacy, which is the other side of perseverance? Is it a rebellion nature, which mother would say that these are the revolted children who are going to bring in the change? In one of her later writings, she says, all around I see revolt, revolt, revolt. And she says, it is these very people who are revolting would bring about the change. We don't know. She is not telling us, thankfully. What is very obvious is that our appraisal of what is divine or undivine is not right. I even laugh to see certain things. Our usual feeling of what is anti-divine seems artificial, seems based on something that's not true, not living. Besides, what we call life here did not seem living to me compared with that world. We call it life. And from that standpoint, it appeared as something dead. Anyway, this feeling should be founded on our relation between the two worlds, on how things make the relation between them easier or more difficult. Then she continues, one thing, I must insist on this, seems to me at the moment to be the most essential difference between our world and the supramental world. And it is only after having gone there consciously, with the consciousness which normally operates here, that this difference has become apparent to me. Everything here, except what goes on within, very deep within, seemed to me absolutely artificial. All the values of our world are artificial. All the masks and facades are artificial. All the relationship between objects and events and circumstances and people is artificial. They are not based on truth. And yet one has to cling to them simply because that's how things are. So she says, none of the values of the ordinary physical life are based on truth. And just as to clothe ourselves, we have to obtain some cloth and sew clothes to put on when we want to wear them, so too to feed ourselves, we need to take things from outside and put them inside our bodies in order to be nourished. In everything, our life is artificial. A true, spontaneous life like the one in the supramental world is a springing forth of things from the action of the conscious will. In ordinary life, everything is artificial. What is this artificiality she speaks of? According to the chance of birth or circumstance, you have a higher or lower position or a more or less comfortable life, not because it is the spontaneous, natural, sincere expression of your way of being and your inner need, but because chance circumstances in life have brought you in contact with these things. And we in the past old world, which is dying, used to call it karma, karmic consequences. If somebody was very fortunate, born in, we can't say fortunate because it's not necessarily fortunate, but born in very seemingly outwardly good surroundings, we said he must have done some good karmas. And if somebody was born in difficult surroundings, it was bad karma. Mother says there is nothing here which expresses the divine law. This would be true only if this world was completely under the divine influence and everything that happened here was the effect of the divine law. But it doesn't express the divine law. So she is relieving us of the burden of the karma. Thank God we need not blame ourselves, because sometimes we do absurd things. Not here but outside, it happens all the time. I met with somebody, saw someone who had a fracture, and he was lying in the hospital and someone came to visit him. He was a spiritual man, seemingly spiritual. This was the old world spirituality. So he comes and sees him, and he's, this man is the devotee of some Baba. So after seeing him, he has to give him some words of solace. Whenever you see a sick man, you must give him some solace, because doctors are all the time frightening. They are not giving solace, They are telling big names and difficult names and prescribing medicines, putting fear. If you don't do this, this will happen. If you don't take this, this will happen. So somebody has to give solace. So he went and gave him solace. This man was hit by a truck. So he's giving him solace. Don't worry, it is law of karma. Maybe in your past life you had hit somebody and therefore you have been hit today. What a solace it is. I was standing by the side, I was wondering whether it is really a solace or it is adding salt to injury. The man who was injured remained quiet. But I was wondering, if I had a fracture and somebody was to say this to me, I would feel doubly bad. Instead of blaming the truck fellow, I am being blamed for my own fracture, which somebody else's, has been responsible for it. So here mother is relieving us of this whole burden that we carried. So she is telling it is not the expression of your way of being and of your inner need. But because chance circumstances in life have brought you in contact with these things. Because this world as it is today is shaped with falsehood and error, mixed with truth and goodness. Both are mixed. But much more falsehood governs this world. Mother writes in one of her prayers, very touching prayer. Falsehood is monarch of this world. My Lord, I lament my limitations. Faith is not born. Gratitude is spent. Everything is darkness all around. Thy enemies seem to triumph everywhere. Lord, has not thy hour come, the hour of thy victory? This prayer she writes in 1930s. Not writing it early. Falsehood is the monarch of the world. So we can see an absolutely worthless man, she is qualifying it still further. Because we have this tendency to say everything that happens is the expression of mother's will. This is a very convenient way to hide and become complacent. Everything that happens is mother's will, divine's will, or human will, we do not know. All that we can say is the expression of the force of circumstances, of the number of forces that are in clash. Whether these forces and the result is actually expressing the divine will or something else, we do not know. So here she is telling an absolutely worthless man may be in a very high position, and a man with a marvelous ability to create and organize may find himself toiling in an absolutely limited and inferior situation, whereas he would be a completely useful person if the world were sincere. She is not saying that the divine is going to do it arbitrarily. The world has to be compelled to become sincere, to spontaneously express the supramental life. So she is telling that this whole change, at another place in one of her prayers she says that in this manifestation we need a hierarchy. Then she says, is it possible that this hierarchy can really be created arbitrarily? Then she said, it's not possible so long as there is insincerity. So the only answer is sincerity. So she says, this would not be if the world were sincere. This artificiality, and she compares this with insincerity, this artificiality, this insincerity, this complete lack of truth became so shockingly apparent to me that one wonders how in so false a world we can have any true evaluations. But instead of making you sad, morose, rebellious, dissatisfied, because after hearing all this, there is rather the feeling of what I was saying at the end, of something so laughably ridiculous that for several days I was seized with uncontrollable laughter when I saw things and people. We can imagine the mother laughing. One of her photographs in late 1960s, this is a talk somewhere in 60s, that what kind of laughter the divine would be seized with, seeing this amusing world. I was seized with uncontrollable laughter when I saw things and people. An uncontrollable laughter. absolutely inexplicable except to myself at the ridiculousness of things. This is the comparison when she sees this world from the supramental standpoint. Everything, the best, no less than the worst, is nothing but ridiculous, absurd, artificial, insincere. We will continue this journey hopefully next Tuesday.